kind of happened rather suddenly, actually. It's kind of interesting. Sister Jean Marie told me about Father Michael, and then after Pascha, after our Easter, she brought me the DVD. Well, I sort of took it and set it on my shelf.
Like you do many DVDs, yeah.
And one day, I picked it up and I put it in my computer, and I watched it. And I was greatly amazed and greatly touched. So much so, when Sister Jean Marie came, I said, "Does Father Michael ever come to the United States?" She said, "It just so happens he is." So we started scrambling around and tried to get as much out of the word as we possibly could on such a short notice. But we do have what we have here. So I'm not going to talk at all. I'm going to let Father Michael talk, because he has a lot to share with us.
Thank you. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady of Magadan, pray for us.
Such a grace to be with you and to speak with the fathers. Our church is so rich, so many ways to pray and worship the Lord, and the rites of the church are the jewels of the church. And so to have such a jewel as the Roman Catholic rite here in San Francisco, it's a great joy. I was at St. Michael's in New York recently as well, which is also a Russian Roman rite, Russian rite. So my story is a very simple one in many ways. I could give you the short version first. I was born and raised in Alaska, and in Alaska we are fed oatmeal by our parents because it's a cold climate. And my mother said to me so many times, "Michael, eat your oatmeal or I will send you to Siberia." So it's very obvious I did not eat my oatmeal, and I ended up in Siberia. My life as a diocesan priest, I love Alaska. I was ordained 34 years ago in Alaska, the first native-born Alaskan priest raised there. Changed radically in 1989. I was invited by my bishop to preach the first public Catholic Mass in a town called Magadan, Russia. Magadan, Russia is a symbol of the prison camps of Stalin that were designed from 1931 until 1954, at Stalin's death in 1953. Prison camps were designed basically to fuel the Russian economy, and Magadan was a major aspect of that economy because it was a gold area for gold, and so the area of Magadan was known for its gold, and therefore discovered gold, nickel, uranium even, and the gold rush of '98 in Dawson Creek became the gold rush of Russia, and it was the place where the camps people to come dig the gold. '89, I went to Magadan, celebrated the first public Mass with a translator, Alvina Verapaiva, and preached in English, obviously, and at that time brought many aspects, symbols of the Catholic Church. It was during the Nativity, it was on Christmas, the Russian Orthodox Christmas on the 7th of January. And I brought small crib sets to talk about the evangelization, to evangelize. And little children and people would come up and ask, "Who is this? And who is that? And what is this?" And it was, in my heart, I realized what an incredible absence of faith, or absence of faith that I found in the people. And my heart really started growing at that moment. My desire started growing at that time to help bring the faith back to Russia. And a sidestep, the translator Alvina Verapaiva became Catholic within 2 years after she was translated for the Mass. The next year I came back, so I fell in love with this former Soviet city that was still very Soviet looking. And the next year, in '90, I came back and fell out of love with the Soviet city because the culture was pretty harsh, the weather was very cold. We were at that time still met by the guards with guns coming off the plane to customs. And I found that my own heart had changed. And so it took a Jesuit retreat of 40 days here in San Francisco at Los Altos. And during that 40-day retreat, I heard in the depth of my heart, the same place when I heard become a priest, the call to go pray in the camps. And I knew that was Magadan, I knew that was for my life, and I knew that I had to go differently. And my own prayer at that time was through a diocesan gathered priest called Jesu Caritas, built under the spiritual brother Charles of Foucault in northern Africa, built around the adoration of the Eucharist and Pustinic life or hermitage. So I took the vows, private vows with the bishop, and eventually after 2 years ended up going to pray in the prison camps of Stalin in Magadan, which is to this day my home. And so that's my life, and that I came to be in Magadan in 1994. And to this very day, I went to pray. There was a priest that went before me from Pennsylvania, and I think Father had heard about him, Austin Moorbacher, who was a bi-ritual priest and celebrated in the Roman Rite there, but also was Byzantine in his celebration, and came for 2 years, and then the climate was pretty harsh, so he had to leave, so I stayed and formed a small community. My community is called Brothers Heart of Jesus. There's very few members right now. There's one. So I kind of feel what Father Kevin has experienced. You know, when 2 or 3 gathered in the name of the Lord, you're doing real well. So I had 2 other priests that have kind of scattered in Russia and come back to the United States. We're a spirituality is like adoration of the Blessed Sacrament in the mornings and in the evenings, and 1 day a week in Pustinic life, which is real rich. I'm not sure, I have some things just to share with you tonight, because I'm not sure if your knowledge, maybe your knowledge is richer than mine in terms of what the Russian history has been, the kind of persecution the church has gone through in Russia, and why the church is in the situation right now, and why it needs to be rebuilt is because it was literally almost annihilated. There's an excellent book called The Forgotten by Father Christopher Zucker, and it's about basically the Byzantine Catholic Church, but also the Latin Rite Church, and the experience of the change, of what happened before and after the Revolution, and then the present day. And just to give you a sense of the presence of what the Catholics, because we think of Russia, we think of Orthodox, correct? That's what and we don't usually vision that there's a minority faith or minority experience better than Catholics. Well, the Catholic Church was there quite present, actually. You might say in every major city there was a Catholic Church before the Revolution. 5 million Catholics were in Russia before the Revolution. Over 600 parishes, over 400 priests, seminaries, 2 seminaries, a number of religious communities. There was journals being published, Catholic journals. So the Jesuits community, Dominicans were there, a number of the orders of sisters were there. So there was quite a lovely and strong Catholic presence for minority's sake. After the Revolution of 1917, until about 1939, the real strongest persecution of Stalin was in the early 30s to the mid-30s. Just to give you a sense of what violence and evil happened, not only to the Catholic Church, but especially, we would say, our Orthodox brothers and sisters. Over 200,000 Russian Orthodox priests were martyred, exiled, died. Over 500,000 monks and sisters. So 700,000 religious people, leaders of the church. 54,000 churches were destroyed, and 54,000 monasteries destroyed, 150,000 Orthodox churches. So what you have after the revolution, there was no more than about 150 or 200 Orthodox churches. Can you understand what that would mean in the devastation of the faith of the people? They're left with very little. And then after 1939, you realize the Russian government expanded, and what happened was expanded into a number of different satellite countries around Russia. For the Catholics, there was over 1,000 priests that were killed, or imprisoned, or externed, deported, 614 closed parishes, and over 24 Catholic dioceses closed down, 27 bishops were martyred, 7,000 priests in the area were killed, 8,000 parishes, monasteries were closed, 3,000 convicts, 10,000 religious community of women were either exiled or dispersed. So these numbers just indicate the level of persecution of the church. And by the time 1989 came, there were only 2 Catholic parishes left in all of Russia. Both of them survived because of the French government that desired that their delegates in Russia would be able to celebrate Mass. One was Notre Dame in St. Petersburg, and one was St. Louis in Moscow. This level, still to this day, St. Louis is there. Where are we right now? That's 89 came, 90 Perestroika came. The first bishop, Bishop Worth for our area. There was also a bishop of Moscow. And little by little, parishes, the parishes started returning, the Orthodox, the Russian government started returning the parishes to the Catholic community. We have probably over 700 now parishes in Russia, about the same amount of Catholic priests, about 600 throughout all of Russia, a number of religious communities. We just ordained, I was telling Father, the first Byzantine Catholic Russian priest in Novosibirsk. We have Russian seminarians, and in our diocese, 4 Russian priests, Roman Catholic priests. There are others, more in other dioceses. Religious sisters. The sisters have many more vocations than the priests. I'm not sure why, but we have lots of Russian sisters. There's an order called the Servants of the Eucharist that were they were founded by a Lithuanian bishop before the revolution, and they went underground, and then when 1989 came, they came forward with 250 vocations of sisters raised up right after 1989, and they're all Russian by background. It's very important that you understand the church has then its own sons and daughters carrying on the faith, and it's not Americans or Poles. Although at this point, obviously, we have most priests are Polish that are serving in Russia at this time. Most priests are Polish background. I said, the Spirit.
It's the heat.
This sounds very much like Russia.
Always telling them.
Yeah.
It's the damn giveaways.
So my call was that I received in my own life is to go and pray in the capsule of the presence of prayer, and to renew the church and to be a person of prayer. So part of my life is a life of hermitage, in a hermitage of Pustinia. But the other was I recognized that there were people who actually were in the prison camps. Magadan was, like I said, was a symbol of the camps. In fact, to this day, if I'm in an airline, I'm flying from Magadan to Moscow, it's only an 8-hour flight. I'm sitting on the plane, and I'm telling somebody that I'm from Magadan, and I said, come and visit, and the response is, no, better you come and visit us. So the Magadan still has this sense of a place of persecution, or a place of the camps. When I, naively I think, for the first few years, I said, okay, what I will do is I'll gather people who were in the prison camps. Now I'm sure at that time, which is the FSB, the KGB, were very delighted to have this young, naive priest make an announcement through Magadan, anybody served in the prison camps? And so I gathered the first group of men and women who were sent to the camps, many of Ukraine, Poles, Latvians, Lithuanians, Germans, to have a meeting. And so it was in the local public library, Pushkin, and I set aside this last Saturday, and I invited, we had 90 people. Now most of those people had not been either publicly proclaimed that they were from the camps, or even many of them hadn't revealed their stories to their families, because living in fear still that their history would impact their life of the family, or life of their sons and their daughters, and even their grandchildren would not get the education. So when they came into the library, and they had 80 people there, what was happening was, first they were being affirmed that they had suffered. Secondly, that they were recognizing, actually, this happened a number of times, people recognized one another who had not seen one another for many years, that they were saying, oh, Vladimir, I recognize you. You were in Butubachak, in the camp I was in 43. And this happened 2 or 3 times where people would break down and say, oh, you were in the same camp with me. And so we would come together and they would start sharing some of their story. But you have to recognize that these people had lived in really isolated life, a very isolated life, and really hadn't told anybody, and even their families. So it took about 5 years of these meetings where they started then revealing who they were and what they suffered. At that time I realized this story was precious. Yes?
What year did you start visiting?
1994, and it took about 1998 actually, before I started recording their stories, videoing, interviewing, and then after that there were opportunities to do a couple of books. And so one of them is Martyrs of Magadan. It's 35 stories of prison camp survivors and their story of why they survived in the prison camp, how they survived in the prison camp. And there's 3 things that always was astounding to me. First of all, their innocence. They were enemies of the... I'm looking at this grandmother in the front row with Daily Communicate. I'm looking, she's the enemy of the motherland, of the fatherland. And their explanation was they never knew why they were arrested. They never knew what was on. Well, it was only later that we realized that Stalin was trying to populate Siberia and also for manual labor to dig gold, and so he would have quota systems, and he would, especially the Baltic countries, he wanted to separate from Russia, so that their assignment was to go into a particular village and find this ages of these people, 18 to 22-year-olds, so that they would have 5 and 6 and 7 and 10, arrest them, and then send them across the Siberian Railroad to the prison camps through Vladivostok up the sea to Magadan. There was a quota system, basically. And that was really the reason why the men and women suffered. The other thing I was astounded is in the hearts of these men and women who lost really their young adulthood, many of them arrested at 17 and 18, you had a 10-year prison sentence, which would be till late 20s, their hearts were not bitter. Now, it was astounding to me. And the reason they would recognize that I would mention this, because they said if we would keep bitterness in our heart, we would die. So we had to live in forgiveness. And so their prayer was their greatest ally to keep themselves from being destroyed by the hatred. By the hatred. Now, one of the women that was in the camps, and she's Branislava, a special prayerful woman. In the camps, oftentimes, how they would catechize and would pray would be through the rosary. And what they would do was, like Branislava, she would take some of the Russian bread, which they would give a certain amount of grams of bread, 300 to 400 grams per person, but often it would be laced with sawdust, so it would be, bread that was not completely edible. But you would take that and then would take the dust or the coal dust, mix it together, make small balls of bread, take from the mattress, small thread, and the fish bones. They had a lot of fish bones. Would make a needle out of fish bones, and then would thread these balls together and make rosaries, bread rosaries, to not only pray but to catechize. So she would take young women to her, and she would go through the mysteries of the rosary and the mysteries of faith. And so tonight, I have one of the rosaries that she made from the prison camps. This is probably 70-year-old. And you can see how delicate and how small it is, because she had to sew it into her prison garment, because if she would be found with the rosary, it would be probably another 10 years in the camp itself. Now, she made the impression of the cross from a cross that was smuggled in from her mother, and then you would use that image to put the cross there. It's really a relic of the campus. It's really delicate. So we also have her number. We have a small chapel, and I have a PowerPoint that I want to show tonight, but we have a small computer, so it'll probably be best to do that in the reception afterwards, and I'll show you, because Magadan actually is quite a beautiful place as well. Siberia is an incredible place, very Siberian, but it also has our chapel of the martyrs. That's Branislava's number, the prison number, when she was released. She hid one of the, because every prisoner had to have a number on their forehead, on their front, and on their back, and so she was D129 for 10 years. D129 was her name. And she received and held one back when she was released. The stories are incredible. Like I said, oftentimes ending with the fact that the only thing that saved him was the faith and the prayer. So I thought I'd just give you a taste of a couple stories here of what people spoke, Let me see if I can find one. Slide, actually.